So the interesting thing about the AI we're using today is that it's trained on human languages, and people tend to use language a bit loosely. So we say things like, it'll take a couple of minutes when we really mean a few minutes. And I once heard a guy say his heart was literally pumping out of his chest. I think he meant figuratively, but literally always sounds better. So what we've discovered is that in order to get AI to do what we want, we have to teach it to be specific. And that's created a new type of programming language. So today I'm talking to Jay Stone, a brand and content creation strategist, as well as Ronnie Scher, a Python expert and senior software engineer at Kubia. Now, both are LinkedIn Learning instructors who have been creating strategies around prompt engineering from different perspectives. So, Jay, how has AI affected how you approach content strategy and marketing?
Well, naturally, since I'm in the branding space, I'm going to
Mhm.
say it makes things pretty, right? The AI images makes things really pretty. So that's what I'm super excited about. But also, when you look at the AI writing tools, if you're going to be creating content, it's time consuming. So I think most of us want more of our time back. So when you get into things like the GPTs, the Chat GPTs, and Bing, right? They're time savers. Of course, we should still be the experts. And I really want to talk more about that in the broadcast.
Yeah, and I think I've also noticed that it really gives you this set of abilities that perhaps you didn't have before. I spent some time drawing, but I am no fine artist, so it gives you that, and then it gives you just another ability. So Ronnie, you're primarily a developer, and the interesting thing, and I talked about this last week in the previous show, that AI has been super disruptive in that specific industry. So where do you see like the productivity gains that Jay was talking about a little bit happen in other industries that we've seen in programming? We've seen like 50% improvement and just people are really more joyful about programming, I guess. I don't know. It's still a little bit frustrating, but what do you think about the productivity gains that we're seeing? Where do they go?
So I think the potential as far as marketing is really the value proposition is incredible, and we're just touching the surface. When you look at medical research, generative AI is used to simulate protein folding. You have models like AlphaFold, which really allow boosting of research to scopes that we didn't have before. And then there's the exciting thing that I think in every industry now, problem solvers are looking at problems through the lens of what can I do with these tools. Obviously, Chat GPT is now connected to the internet when you have GPT Plus. So, what can you do with that? With the model, not just having a snapshot in time, but access to real time information. And I guess as of 2 days ago, I got to see where text to video is going, which it's very rudimentary right now, but at the pace that things are going, you can totally imagine just prompting away at something that will become a realistic video.
Yeah, so I know that thing about the pace is just unbelievable. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it before. I was around when the internet first came out, and it just feels a lot different. And it also feels like, whatever you're seeing today is going to be old news, like in a couple of weeks. Today,
Mhm.
OpenAI launched their iOS app, for example. We saw a whole slew of announcements from Google, and I think a lot of people are stressed, perhaps just about the volume of things like coming at everyone. How do you sort of manage that, Jay, with all the things that are coming at us? Like, how do you sort of figure out what things you think are going to be real useful versus like all the noise?
Yeah, and so there's generally for me, and you're right, it's moving so incredibly fast, right? And I always tell one of the things I teach a lot of classes. One of the things that people ask me is, "When are you going to teach this again?" And I'm like, "I'm not. There's not enough time, right? I've got to teach the next thing." And so that's one of the bigger things. Is like if you don't get involved, this is one of those things where you can't afford to be a late adapter. So I will be the first one to
Hmm.
say I'm not a first adapter, but I am an early adapter, right? So how I make the distinction on what's around, it's like there's always these front leaders that are just really really good, really really far ahead of everyone else, and then you have the emulators. Okay, sometimes the emulators become front runners. Here's the people think that the best to market or the first to market is not it. Right now with AI, it's whatever's the easiest to use is what's going to get the traction. Chat GPT may not be the best AI writer on the market, but it is the easiest to sign up for, and it's the easiest for people to use and understand. So right now, what's the easiest that gives us the best results? Those are the things that I'm paying attention to sticking with.
That's true. So, Ronnie, you know, I talked a little bit about prompt engineering in the intro, and you have done a course for LinkedIn Learning on prompt engineering for generative AI. So, can you make sure we're all just on the same page by what we mean by this prompt engineering?
So to me, it means two things. For users, it means knowing how to speak to AI to get the best results out of it, basically.
Mm-hmm.
If you follow Jay on social media, you know that she has an incredible talent and skill that she's developed to get the most out of image generation, writing generation. That is expert prompt engineering at play as far as users go. When it
Mm-hmm.
comes to taking a step back to programmers and designers like you, my work that I do in Kubia, it also means what we do once we receive user input. So when I design an AI system, if I receive something from Jay, do I need to wrap it in a little bit more context? Do I need to go through it and kind of maybe trim words that I know the model doesn't like? So if I'm suppose I have a product that gives you fun facts about the United States, do I have to give it a paragraph about, general knowledge about the United States before the question and then say answer this? So that's part of the prompt design that's maybe not exposed to us as end users.
That's so true. There's all this sort of layers of stuff in the background that people are not aware of. So,
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the
and
secret. First, understanding that, as I mentioned, it's a language model. So it emulates human language. And I think that what people don't understand is that human language is kind of fuzzy. The AIs are just computers, so they don't know that you're not supposed to like lie or that you're not supposed to like make things up. So all they know is language. So I think that's kind of been the huge discovery that language is kind of strange. And knowing at least two languages, I understand that how you express yourself in one language is very different from another one. There's like different rules, but the act of like learning how people communicate is really strange. And I think if you've experienced that, that gives you a slightly different perspective. So Jay, it seems like AI is going into everything these days. So there's all these different kind of AIs. Like I think you mentioned video, and there's now. So I just saw a demo of something that would take an audio file. It's like maybe a performance in music, and it was able to separate each one of the individual channels. So we'll be able to separate like the drums into their own track. If there was like two or three people singing their voices into different tracks, are all these things basically the same? How are they the same, and how are they different? And what do you think that people should know about these different type of products? You mentioned ChatGPT, but there's also a lot of other competitors.
Yeah, there's a lot of competitors out there. And so many of the AI that are in the same industry have, say, the same, I'm going to say, framework that they're built on.
Mm-hmm.
For example, when we talk about images, you've got Dolly, uh, MidJourney, and Stable Diffusion. Stable Diffusion has so many other platforms that are built on the Stable Diffusion model. Leonardo AI, Blue Willow, all of them, Lexica, all of them are still built on the Stable Diffusion framework. And so it's kind of like if you think back to websites back in the day with HTML. HTML is the framework, but you can go to different .coms and be on different platforms. So think of it that way. So there's not that many frameworks in these different industries, right? But there
Mhm.
are different platforms, and this is back to that user experience we talked about, that makes it seem like there's so much AI out there. It really is about the use of the platform and what makes it easier for end users as to whether or not it's getting traction. So the frameworks are pretty similar. It's the interface that we're seeing that's different.
Yeah, and ChatGPT itself is basically just an interface built on top of a model. And I think that that's where maybe people get a little bit confused between the interface based on the API that's based on a large language model, that's based on a foundation model. It's a lot of like layers, but it's kind of what makes it so interesting. And we see things that are like, what even is the thing that I just talked about that's able to separate, is that a language model or is that audio model? You talked about video, like what is that? There's generative, there's all these definitions, and they really, honestly, they drive me crazy. So thanks for clarifying some of it. And I think that when you start playing with them, you're going to get a little bit of an inkling that perhaps there are things that all the models do have in common. And I think maybe how we communicate with them is perhaps similar. I know that, when you learn to prompt for like MidJourney or DALI, some of the things that you do there, although they're different commands, they're kind of similar. You're clarifying. And I know that I'm very guilty of this. You mentioned, Jay, that you teach a lot. When you teach, the students are always, you know, cognizant of how well you deliver the information, how clear you are, and they can easily get confused with the instructions. So Ronnie, let's just focus on chatbots. Ignore like all the other great stuff out there. So most people are used to just going to like ChatGPT and type in a question like they do in Google. So what are some of the potential things that people might run into when just typing in, I want to know how to make a great chili? Like what are they going to run into?
I think the thing that I get to see working with AI, training models at work, we're used to Google. And so we kind of, like you said, we type in as if it were Google. One of the issues is that these models are maybe 90% accurate, but 100% confident. So they can tell you something confidently. That's what we call a hallucination. And so I think there's two ways to mitigate that. And I think with ChatGPT, it's quite difficult because the output is quite long and you don't want to get lazy. One, evaluate everything that the model puts out. Second, give the model a lot of context to work with. So if you give it some true data and you ask it to reformat it, you're already putting yourself in a better place as far as having the truth in there, in the prompt. And I think at the end of the day, we're used to search engines. We need to understand that this is still a model. It does a sort of wheel of fortune operation over and over and over for each word. And the odds on that wheel of fortune are just really good for the right word to come up. That's how I would think about it.
That's a really good point. That if you if you like, have you ever seen like Wheel of Fortune, and there's like one person and you know what the answer is, but they can't get to it somehow? Like somehow the
Mm-hmm.
language is being viewed differently by different people, and you're like, how can they? There's only like one letter missing. How could they possibly get it wrong? And this is
Mm.
the problem with language, and the problem perhaps a little bit with the AIs. I don't know. What's your
And
what's your perspective on
I,
that?
I think, and there's two things. Also, we have to remember that we've trained these models on enormous data sets, the entire internet, so to speak. And
Mm-hmm.
these data sets reflect real problems with us as a society. So when you talk about biases,
Mm-hmm.
bias is in text. Racism is on the internet. This AI was pumped with enormous amounts of text and not so much ability to filter it just by the fact that it's so much. And so we really have to evaluate to make sure that we're not creating systems that reinforce problems that we already have, because those problems are very present in our language. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of wanted to touch on that. I know that when we train our models in Kubiya, it's a lot. We take existing models and we fine tune them. So we add
Hmm.
a layer of training to them, and it's all about the training data, and we meticulously have really, really skilled people go over this data by hand to make sure it's incredibly high quality, because I think that's the space that the next generation of these AI companies and disruptors are going to compete in, having models that were trained not just on sheer volume of data, but having models that are trained on incredible data, on data that was created by extremely skilled people, and that's that. Sorry, so those were like 2 points that I kind of jumped on. Yeah.
Yeah, Jay, what's your perspective on these issues, you think?
Yeah, I definitely uh, picked up a lot of biases right away. And I've had to do what I call, I have to put on the bias bypass, right? You have to
Hmm.
prompt for the bias bypass. And there were several things that I had to find related to complexions, right? They weren't
Hmm.
saying about the complexions. And so I had to teach people you can't prompt, light skin, dark skin. You have to give a color. So almond, honey, we had to be specific.
Hmm.
So I teach specificity. The other thing is that everybody wants to be polite to the bots, right? They want to say please and thank you.
That's so
And I
true.
was like, it's still a machine, guys. And so they're saying things like, there's a lot of full figured people in my community, and they say things like curvy, right? Full figure. And so it's giving them these Marilyn Monroe. And I was like, they were like, how do you get the plump models? I was like, I put in the word fat, right? Obese. I'm giving you like technical medical terms that it would
Right, right.
understand, right? Right? Because it scored really high on the medical exam, the law exam, right? So
Hmm.
it is a very intelligent but not politically correct machine, right? And we are putting our human sensibilities into the machine and frustrated with the outcome. So this is one time where being politically correct isn't going to get you the results. You kind of got to be black and white with it.
That's very true, and I know that I also have noticed just that some of the biases just in if you start just asking, especially mid-journey for things, it'll just give you a certain type of person, and you do have to be like you said. I love your tip of saying almond skin or specifying like a shade of color, because I wasn't getting what I wanted, and I totally ran into those problems. But I think Ronnie and I can probably relate to this that as developers, we kind of know that we continuously just work in this environment where we have to be specific and deliberate, and we know that it's the different commands and you learn the structures. What perhaps, Ronnie, have been some of the tips for people who are maybe getting prompts wrong that you feel as a developer that are really useful to sort of let people know? I love what Jay said about being specific and putting keywords that to make sure nobody else is around. Just type in the keywords and
I think
just be honest.
I think actually what Jay said was genius, because if you think
Hmm.
about it, MidJourney, every picture on the internet, I don't know if you as a developer know this, Ray, most pictures
Hmm.
of the internet have an alt text. And a lot of times these pictures were scraped, and the alt text, which is there to serve people with screen readers, was used to kind of match it up as a training data. Now, if you think about it, Jay's tapping into something extremely powerful. What is more common is going to work better than what we are doing to kind of to be polite with one another a lot of times. And it's strange. It's actually a reality check what prompts actually work for us as a society. Maybe when it comes to code, we are starting to learn how to ask for things and how to describe our own code. And that is actually interesting, because initially, I think the first generative AI we encountered was probably Copilot. Ray, was that for you too?
Yeah, yeah,
And,
definitely.
and with that, initially, I thought about it and I was like, oh my, we're going to lose it. Nobody's going to learn how to code anymore. But something different, I think, happened, when people are starting to name their functions because it pays off to have readable code, because then Copilot can kind of work with you. And so I think we're learning how to talk about things that as technologists we weren't very good at talking yet, because strangely enough, describing things and giving our functions good names is the lazy thing to do now.
Right. Yeah, I feel like the languages are actually training us to be perhaps better communicators. Like, you don't, when you're not specific, and, perhaps as teachers, like it's a little bit better for us. But, I'm guilty just as anybody else of just telling ChatGPT something and having, and this is why I think it's brilliant that it's called chat, because you really have to have a chat with it. You start with something, then you go, okay, that's not quite it. Try it this way. And eventually you come up with like prompts that are pretty long, and you save those so that you can refer back to them. But in a way, it's kind of like training us. I do want to sort of acknowledge some people that are in here. So just different people that are checking in. We have quite a few people, and just saying hi to everyone, and hello to
Hello.
Alicia. And we have a lot of J fans as well. Here's a
Hi,
Diana.
guys.
I'm sure some of these people you recognize. Kai is a really good friend of
Yes,
mine.
hi.
So
Hi, guys.
a lot of people around Sakia, and there's Suit here. So, and then there was a really good question. Well, there was a fantastic comment here. Hi is the best teacher too. So that's great. See, this is not like Ronnie's alternate account, because I know he's your biggest fan, I think, but this is somebody else. So no, this is a good question. I thought and I love these names. Tactical Tangerine Defense says, is it possible to over prompt AIs? Is it possible to
Oh,
enter too much information? So love your thoughts on it. Ronnie, go ahead. And what do you think?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
It is. Just like it's possible to overwhelm a person with information.
Hmm.
And let me give you a little secret about this. As someone who designs these systems,
Hmm.
um, most of these models, or all of them, have a set limit of how many tokens they can handle. And when I say tokens, you can think of them as maybe words or sub parts of a word that make sense, right? If I say
Hmm.
rethink, that's maybe 2 tokens, re and think. Um, and a lot of times things get difficult for the model uh, if it's given a whole lot of them. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't give context. It's to say that a lot of times removing unnecessary context is problematic. So being concise is extremely important. But a lot of
Hmm.
times I think that just giving 2 words and expecting an image to look like you imagine it is not the right thing to do. A lot of times with MidJourney, an interesting way of going about it is maybe feeding an image to MidJourney, getting it to describe it, and that may give you a little bit of an insight on how long or concise the prompt should be.
What do you think, Jay? Is it better to like start over or continue to try to talk the chatbot?
Yeah, I generally tell my students you've prompted it to death, right? You just
Hmm.
killed it, right? Because we had something workable, and this is let me start with this piece of advice, right? Don't get so married to your idea of the outcome that you don't allow the bot to do its job, to use its imagination, to use the access to the information that it has. And so sometimes we're so married to what we want to see on the screen, right, that we continue to prompt past the quality outcome. Okay. And
Hmm.
that's what I call prompting to death. You've killed it. And so it's really important, I think, to stop when it's good, okay, versus continuing to try to get it perfect, right? We have to release the desire to have it perfect. And so I always say with MidJourney, right, the prompt to generate images starts with imagine, right?
Hmm.
You're taking away all of its power, okay, when you prompt too tightly for the outcome. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think that there's all this conversation about the differences between, when you go to ChatGPT, at least it lets you choose like these different parameters between creative and precise. So maybe you can talk a little bit about when do you go to these different settings, or when, when it's good to try to get it to be precise, and maybe how you can improve and make something a little more precise.
And I tend to, yes, I tend to be more precise with writing than with
Hmm.
images. Okay, because I could never imagine what they can come up with these images in terms of textures, backgrounds, things like that, and word combinations. But as a subject matter expert, when I go into prompt for outcomes with marketing and things like that, it is specific because I'm the expert and I'm really clear about what I need as an outcome. So I'm much more precise on writing because there's not a lot of room, because there's for me um one specific interpretation that I need, because that's the uniqueness in the content. Okay, the image that
Hmm.
matches that, when I go to Dolly or MidJourney, doesn't have to be as precise. Okay,
Hmm.
so leave more freedom. If it's about interpreting expertise, be precise. Okay, if it's about interpreting the visuals, be more creative.
Hmm.
Allow the bot to do more work.
So how do you infuse, I know that when you prompt in Midjourney, you get like 4 images back, and you do sometimes wish that it had more variety. Is there any way to sort of free the AIs to say, "Hey, go nuts," or "I want to see completely different things"? Like, what sort of things do you do to not limit it so much when you're trying to get something really creative out there?
Right. And so with Midjourney, there's a couple of things to do. One is stylization, the style, right?
Mm,
The
there's,
more the higher the style parameter, right, which it goes from like 1 to 1,000 or something like that. The higher the parameter, that when you get up to the 1,000, you're saying go crazy, make it look like whatever you can think of. Now that tends to be more sci-fi ish. So it usually is, the default is the medium style on the settings. If you go in and you do / settings, is where you could see the style. Yep, you see some height,
mhm,
some style. Um, and then there is chaos, right? The parameter for chaos, which means the 4 images that you give me. The higher the chaos number, which is a dash dash C, I think you can, I can't think of the chaos parameters. But when you do the chaos parameters, it says these 4 images, I want them completely different, right?
mm,
So it's like dash dash C, and then you put in a chaos number. The higher the number is, the more different the 4 images are. Most of the
that's
time,
excellent.
the chaos comes up and the 4 images are very similar.
Hmm.
Okay. But the higher that number is, and I want to say it can go up to 60,000, the higher that
Wow.
number is, the more different the 4 images in the grid are. So you can do it with style and chaos. Those are the way that you let the machine go
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah, I
Incredible.
really didn't know about the chaos, and a lot of times, yeah, I end up with like these really similar kind of images, which is like
Mhm.
fine, but like say for example here, I was querying to something for the articles that I usually do after the episode. I try to get kind of images for what the episode is about. So I did one where I was trying to show, sort of a boat passing by New York, and I was getting like these really similar boats, and nothing really worked for me. So, or here I was trying to be like more specific about I want to get basically a robot plane with blocks, and for some reason it's just giving me a robot sitting on blocks, which I didn't understand. I try to be specific, but yeah, I felt like the styles were maybe a little bit too close. Now you can sometimes specify like somebody's name, which I think is kind of useful. And you probably have seen this website before. It's sort of like the ability, a site that gives you like a lot of different styles by category. So you could go to like one of
Uh-huh.
these sections
Yep.
here, and then you can kind of see different styles, and then it gives you some prompts to sort of put in the names of whatever style you're looking for. So maybe you want to do like Afrofuturism. I didn't know that was a style. So then you
It is.
can use these different. This is great. This will be great for this episode. You can definitely choose, I guess, the versions, and this is really nice. And then you can kind of look at other styles or other sort of artists or types of styles. So really good stuff in here. Jay.
Yeah, I use that quite a bit because there's just no way for us to know all the different artists that are out there. And this is the benefit. There are so many people out there that are so angry, in the creative visual arts community, right? They're really
Hmm.
angry about this is going to take our job and things like this. And here's the two things you got to remember. One, the bots are trained on existing things, right? Existing content,
Hmm.
existing text, existing images. So if you're creating something completely new, only humans can do that, right? Only humans can do that. And so while you can have things blend together, it's still going to be a blend of whatever's out there. So that's one thing. The other thing is look at how much further you can stretch your own skill set. Look at how much faster you can generate content. I have a few people in my classes that are graphic designers, and they were like, "Oh my goodness, I can generate illustrations or text or photos so much faster now to generate more stuff." Or this wasn't my strength, I can do it, or I can mix my mediums together, right? I can illustrate some, generate some, and illustrate the rest, those kinds of things. So look at it as a tool to expand your skill set versus replace your services or existence.
Yeah, and what I really like is that Ronnie, that it's really very much like a programming language that we would use all the time. So this ability of the model to have just parameters that you can use to get more of what you need. So let's say, for example, demo. So I have, for example, this parameter list, and somebody was asking about this. Like James was asking if we could maybe explain the flags. Where do you see this, like from a developer point of view? Like what is this flags thing?
I mean,
That's very programmy thing.
if you, yeah, I mean, in software, in terminal commands, we use those all the time. So I'm assuming
Hmm.
this comes from Unix-like systems, but it's a way to set parameters, to set numbers, to kind of pass information to your generation. And I think Jay gave some great ones. I mean, if you want to use, if you want a series to kind of create maybe a series of postcards that look alike, maybe you want your generations not to be chaotic. If you want things that are out there and you want to kind of explore different directions, maybe you do want chaos. There's one I like to
Hmm.
use when I use an image, an existing image inside my prompt, which is I think IW image weight, which tells
Hmm.
you how much should come from the image and how much should come from the words. And I think that's where it stems from. Basically, just you give it a sentence, but there are some dry parameters, and having a settings menu would kind of slow things down uh, in this situation.
Yeah, that's one criticism that I have about these things, that it feels like they really need an interface, right? Like it's crying out for somebody to design something better. It feels like we're all like programming in like 1960s DOS or something. Like you're just giving parameters, 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 and that's not how creative thinks. But if you look at the use of technology, and a few weeks ago in another episode, I have the VP of AI for design for Microsoft on the show. And they were talking about, if you look at the history of design, so he actually was the president of RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design, like one of the premier like art schools. And he was saying that artists have always used technology. This is just another piece of technology. And I think that you're already seeing, not the ability of the AIs to generate, but in the way that it can like mishmash things and combine, say, artist styles. You're seeing the real artists, which are now going to be not just people that can technically draw or that have all the right kind of oils. You're going to see just the ability of the average person, perhaps a lot of developers that understand the language, be able to create amazing things. So, we've seen this same similar thing in ChatGPT with the concept of the playground, Ronnie. And I know that you, as a developer, probably have a little bit of an understanding of what this is. Can you talk about the playground in ChatGPT? Like, do you ever go to it, and maybe some of the parameters that are available in there?
Yes. So the playground is the most underrated AI tool in the world. And what it is it's I think meant for people who develop AI, but it doesn't require coding skills, and that's cool. And I think I'm going to focus on three things that you can do with them, with the playgrounds that are not available for you as a ChatGPT user. And the first one is the system message. If you've used ChatGPT, after a while, you realize what it perhaps has been told that it is. Does that make sense? It
Mm.
tells you I'm an AI model who was trained on the date of this and that by OpenAI, right? So you can override that and say, you are Klingon speaking AI, right? Which I know, Ray, you're into sci-fi, so this may
Talk.
be more interesting.
Can give you a
Yeah.
couple of sentences
So
if you.
so you give it that system, and all of a sudden, that's the context from which it builds a conversation. So that's a cool one.
Mhm.
Then there is temperature, and you see that on the bottom right. That's one of the dials, and that's kind of a weird balance between, I will say, risk taking, which in human language would be viewed maybe as creativity, and predictability. So if you prompt something at temperature 0, you'll get something pretty dry and predictable. Temperature 1, you can get all sorts of interesting hallucinations. So if you want an interesting bot, you want to figure out what's the right balance there. And the last one, and that's available in the other models, is few shot learning. So if you switch over perhaps to, you see the model selection on the top right. If you switch over to GPT-3, you'll see that it changes the interface. And what you can do is you can sort of customize models to do particular tasks very well. So let's say I want a model to be able to write tweets in particular styles. I can give it a
Mhm.
few examples of me saying something, the style of the tweet, and then something called the stop sequence. Then again,
Mm.
me saying something, and then eventually, after about 3 or 4 of these, it may be able to kind of understand, pick up on the pattern rather than an instruction. So you won't say in the style of, because it doesn't know who I am, but you will
Mhm.
give it a few examples and you have a very specific model, so to speak.
That's super interesting. So yeah, there's actually not only a lot of power here, but what I like is that there is definitely it really makes you think of the way that the computers are going to deliver something is with these specific parameters. And like you said, my most important thing is to understand that you can say to the AI, hey, pretend that you are this. So one of the famous things, if you look at the implementation of these systems, is there is a way to ask the GPT to pretend that they're Socrates. So they call it Socratic mode. And you can
Mm.
say, don't answer the question that I'm going to ask you, but ask
Ask.
me a series of questions to develop my
Genius.
skill. So you could say, you're
That's
Socrates. And I think Khan Academy is actually using this to help kids learn different concepts, because I think kids often just want the answer right away. And sometimes, that ability to, arrive at something through a series of questions is just so much more powerful for learning. So somebody
now.
was, go ahead, sorry.
I just wanted to point out, this is a tool that's been designed for developers to sort of sculpt their systems, which they can then embed in code. So there's actually something that will give you a code snippet there, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
good starting point. If you train more models using the on top of OpenAI models, you'll actually have access to the models you trained in the playground. So while this is a developer tool, I think it's super underutilized by people outside of the tech world, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that we're all used to Google kind of made us think of questions as the, I don't know, uh, the starting point of everything. And I think sometimes you have to go, and there's so much creativity that can happen as a result
Mm.
of understanding what the parameters are, and also that you don't have to use the playground. You can actually do this in regular ChatGPT, right? You can
Mm.
say, hey, you are this person or this
Hmm.
kind of, you have this perspective. Speak like one of the, popular prompts is explain this to me like a 5-year old, right? That's a common prompt. So, you could really get to different things that you want by understanding the parameters, and everybody should go check it out if they haven't before. So we have like some additional questions in the chat that I want to sort of let's see, get to. um, let's see. Well, great tips. Somebody says, I love it when it's just generic LinkedIn user. Yeah, so Nahaku said, yeah, definitely be specific to work around biases as well. And Talisha says specificity. One of those, there's certain words in the English language that take me like 10% more brain power to say. And that's one of them. The other one's like inconspicuous is always really difficult for me. So forgive me. So yeah, definitely. So let's see. Anthony's actually asking, how do you view this? Do programmers now need to work a lot on API based on AIs in order to leverage their career or continue working from scratch? That's a good question for you, Ronnie, since you probably hire developers, or at least you're around a lot of them. So does every programmer now need to learn, AI APIs?
Absolutely, and I'll take it a step further. And I think we're at the phase, because of what Jay said, which is so true. Developers need to start learning how to build models and how to fine tune models,
Mm-hmm.
because we're at a point when it's democratized. You can take a very powerful open source model and create, you know, a GPT that does something very particular.
Sorry.
And I think that this is something, a space which developers have to enter into, because companies are now, there was a conference by IBM where somebody from Hugging Face said this: every company needs their own GPT. We cannot have everybody use one AI tool anymore. So I think people need to roll up their sleeves and get into training AIs and utilizing existing ones at the very least. Yeah.
As somebody who works in branding and in the creative fields, Jay, what's your perspective on this? Should everybody be using ChatGPT? Does everybody need to know like all these techniques?
Yeah, definitely. So the short answer is yes. I'll
Hmm.
expand on that a little bit. Uh, I get a lot of phone calls, a lot of fear mongers, right? A lot of conspiracy
Hmm.
theorists about how the government or criminals are going to take our identity and steal our voices, and we're going to get arrested, and we weren't even there, right?
Mm.
The short, the fact of the matter is that AI is not going away. So it's really an adapt or die type of situation. And so, yes, everyone should be using it, because here's the truth: our lives are already inundated with many forms of AI. The generative AI is the thing that's scaring people a little bit. But AI, I mean, if you think about it, if you think about, Alexa or things like that. I'm trying to whisper so she doesn't come on, right? Think about that. Hey Siri, you know, you're already dealing with a lot of AI. Okay.
Hmm.
So it's the generative AI that seems to be making people uncomfortable. It's an adapt or die thing. So the short answer is yes, everyone should be doing this, because with the rate that generative AI is growing, which is faster than anything that we've seen in our lifetime, okay, you simply can't afford to be left behind. And I'm going to specifically say this to women, people of color, and women of a certain age. You guys are really getting clobbered with this technology gap. Okay. So
Hmm.
saying, I don't like technology, I'm not good at technology, I'm afraid of technology, isn't going to change the fact that not only is it here to stay, it is accelerating at an incredible pace. And you can't afford to be left behind, particularly not just if you're trying to earn income, even if you're retirement age, if you're baby boomers, baby, they're going to have generative AI at some point in the grocery store. Okay. You're going to have to go, you're going to have to get it together. So you can't afford, it's almost like, what was the movie? You Can't Handle the Truth. You know what I'm saying? You can't handle being left behind, okay, on this AI. So absolutely, You know, dive in, dive in.
Absolutely.
I do
And I
love
think
that. And sorry, go ahead.
I
Go ahead,
think
Ron.
I think also what Jay says is super powerful. And with other technological, leaps, uh, I think this one presents a really unique opportunity because if you're a person who's been around for a while, you have a lot to bring to the table when utilizing these tools. As a writer, as a curator of good writing, this is the first time when you have this technological advance where experience really puts you ahead of the game. If you're amazing at branding, you can do even more incredible things with
Mm.
generative AI. Usually you get left
Mhm.
behind. So I think kind of letting fear kind of take away one's advantage because of experience with prior technologies is a huge, huge loss of opportunity.
Mm. That's a great point, and I think that when people have said in the past, "I can't draw like even stick figures," all that is gone. You can create unbelievable art, and all you already I think somebody said on Twitter that the amazing thing is that the programming language of the next century is actually English, and you know what? Everybody knows how to use it already. It's just that you need to learn a little bit, maybe more communication in order to get really good at it. And but it's not like when we had to learn like Python or Java or Rust or whatever the new thing is. You already know how to use this language, and you can ramp up very quickly. And some of the defaults are even more fantastic. I know, like in MidJourney 5.1, the defaults actually give you pretty good stuff already, right? And Jay.
Yeah. Yeah. The defaults for 5.1 is astronomical. I was not impressed with 5. Everyone else was. I thought 5 looked a little, everything looked a little plastic in 5.
Hmm.
So I stayed with 4. And then I skipped from 4 right to 5.1 raw. I use the raw parameter, which is a whole nother level. But I hear, rumor has it that 6 will be out in the near future. So
Wow.
if you think about it, I started prompting with 4 in March. So we're
Mm.
talking about 2 months. We've gone from 4 to 5 to 5.1. So to 6. So literally every 30 to 45 days, we're in a new version. And we're seeing the same thing with Chat GPT, maybe not every couple of months, but 6 months. We're seeing it. This is why you can't afford to be left behind. Because
Hmm.
by the time you jump in, we are 3 or 4 versions into the model. Okay. And you're still trying to figure out, where do I sign up and how do I register? Okay. Chat GPT shuts down registrations ever so often. You can't even get
Hmm.
in,
Mm.
and then they'll let a new wave of people in because they can't even handle the capacity of growth. I know I'm preaching. I'm on the bucket here. I mean,
That's right.
I'm up here and I'm preaching,
You're
right?
right.
I'm going to
Hmm.
get down. But the whole point is, I just have so much passion around people not being left behind. You 3 months from now, 3 months from now,
Hmm.
you'll be so deep in the hole you won't be able to climb out. So
Mm.
don't
Yeah, I
worry.
think that I totally relate to that. I'm a career switcher. I came from the graphic design industry of all things,
Hmm.
and I know a lot of people that got left behind as graphic designers because they didn't want to change, especially like in the news design industry.
Hmm.
And think about like some of the things that we're seeing now is the ability of AI to generate presentations, the ability of AI to go through like a live stream like this and do some basic editing. And that all going to get better. And I think that in the future, what you're going to see is people will be thinking about the creative thing that they want to develop. Like, say you want to do a podcast. All right. Well, what right now, in like, if you look at YouTube, you see like a carpenter, but that carpenter has to know how to use Final Cut Pro and he has to
Mm.
know how to have the right plugins and you have to know how to do like a J-Cut edit. All that is about to go away. This is the time to what they say, grab the bull by the horns and go with it. It's getting easier. The computers are going to be able to do a lot of the mechanical work, and like like Ronnie said, it's going to be everywhere. Case in point, I want to show you this article that I found just the other day. Let's see, and it's like Wendy's now. just started testing an AI chatbot. Come on, like, okay, if Wendy's has like a advanced team of developers working on the AI chatbot, and if you think about it, does that not make like a lot of sense? Has anybody not had a hard time going to Wendy's and getting people to understand or understanding like order please?
Right.
You're like,
Everybody sounds like Charlie Brown's teacher, right?
that's right. And my first job was like at a Burger King, and it was either I didn't understand them or they didn't understand me. I mean, some people have thicker accents. Like the ability of AIs are going to be able to understand that, and it's just going to be a better world. But it's a really weird time. We're in the place where things are changing so fast, and the things that are coming out are unbelievable. So, speak a little bit about all like some of the things that perhaps you're impressed in, Jay, when it comes to image tools. The landscape of like this video is actually something that's really particularly big now, right?
Right. And I think the first thing people think about is generating video, since we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about generative AI, but the video editing with AI is
Mm-hmm.
incredible. So when we look at platforms like Descript, right,
Mm-hmm.
where it spits out a transcript, and if I say or ah or shucks, right, and I don't want that in the video, I simply delete it from the text of the transcript, and then there's this seamless editing that happens where it's deleted from the video as well. And it happens in a short period of time. And so now for me, the bane of my existence was video editing. I shoot and post. Okay. You're going to get all the arms, and I don't have the time or patience for it, right? Put it in Descript, and it takes all of these extra spaces and time out of that and out of the video, and I'm still shooting and posting. So that's one of my favorite tools. And then of
Mm.
course, I gotta get on the bandwagon for DID, which, because we can generate such great images in MidJourney, they actually make the images talk. And we're not talking about just lips moving, like the head moves a little bit, the eyes blink, right? And the person is really pretty animated pretty well for this to have come from a still photograph, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now, and not just uh, the AI talking, right? You can actually upload your own audio to it. So I
Mm-hmm.
love that now we're personalizing the AI. And then these presenters can be put into PowerPoint presentations or Canva presentations and things like that. So now we're humanizing the AI a little bit and making it more engaging and entertaining. Okay. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So that's really going to just open the world up for anybody that wants to express themselves and give everyone the ability. You don't have to learn Final Cut. You don't have to learn, the complex like editing, perhaps even lighting. Like some of the AI tools are just clearing things up, making them, think about there's like cameras now that will automatically like blur the background. Everybody has seen those. I have a tool that I use for all these streams. I do use Descript for exactly what you're talking about. It's like an unbelievable tool that just gives you the ability to edit stuff as if you were editing basically what is a Word document, which everybody can relate to that. Everybody knows how to edit in Word. You have a Word, and if say you want to get rid of a sentence in Descript, you just select it like you would a Word document and just hit the delete key, and bam. Now, it didn't just delete the words, it transcribed it, and then it actually deleted, that sentence from the audio. And if you have a big gap like this, you could just literally scoot this gap over. Like, I don't want that big gap in between the words. You could just drag the word over. And it's really one of those like life-changing tools. Another tool that I use a
And
lot is something called Cast Magic that for me, I was thinking about doing like show notes at the end of a show. And I'm like, I just don't have time for that. And then I discovered this tool that basically just gives you a description. This is from my last episode. It gives you all these different ways of looking at the interview. So you can, take a look at, say, the AI content here. Gives you, okay, here's a few titles from what happened on the episode. Here's all the keywords. Here's a bio for the speaker. Like, these are things that I had to generate myself before. Here's time codes of key points. So this is what I build my show notes before. This is what AI is doing. It is just democratizing creative work and giving the ability of people to be able to do 10 times what they used to be doing. And I do want to play that video because I think it's fantastic of the demo that you made, Jay. I know it has audio in it, so we'll have to just take a pause and listen to it.
Hello, good looking. I'm Brandy, the brand queen. The brand mother, Jay Stone, and I would like to thank you for dropping by. By the way, happy branding.
Well, hello, Ray and Ronnie. Did I hear someone say AI? I thought so. I'm Boriqua, an AI spokesmodel generated by Jay Stone. I totally love your courses on LinkedIn Learning. Like they say, always be learning.
That is so good. And you know, you might laugh a little bit about the stiffness of
It's
like
great.
everything but the face, but think about what we are able to do now. And anybody with, I mean, how did you make that, Jay? Just talk a little bit about maybe what you used and how
Yeah,
that
and
got
so I use
developed.
two different platforms. One, MidJourney, to do a still image. And then I simply uploaded it into DID. And I think the website is did.ai. But DID is the video animator where it does allow you to upload your own video. One of the AIs had my voice. So I
Hmm.
uploaded my own audio. The other one, I just typed in a script and selected from the existing voiceover experts that they have. Um, but the animation, I don't have to click animate. I don't have to click anything. It picked up my voice and gave it the lip mime all by itself. I simply chose the picture, put in the script or put in the audio, and hit generate.
That's
That's it.
amazing. So yeah, you're talking about this tool right here. I think it's
Yes.
d-id.com. It's a little bit always weird. Don't worry about any of the links. I'll have them all in the episode notes afterwards. So I mean, just what that tells you is that with some simple prompts, you were able to generate something that, it looks a little, a little stiff right now, but just think about, you know, a year from now, stuff's moving so quickly now that it's not going to be a long time before these tools are perfected. So, is there anything that you're excited about, Ronnie, that's out there that you've been using a lot?
I'm having. Can you guys? I gotta switch camera. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I think it went to like it went to like a sort of weird view. Don't worry about it. Well, let's see if we can maybe answer some additional questions from the stream now. And honestly, I think we're a little bit over time, so forgive us. So actually, I like this question from Fabio. It's kind of long, so let's see if we can fit it in. AI prompting. Do you know which of the current major AI projects work the best? Uh, would be the best to understand our initial intent and break it down into prompts. As we know, we can connect two AI tools like two alpaca agents and ask one, and this is a long one, so I might have to pull it back up here. So let's see. AI can evaluate the response, yeah, and age from agent B. So I don't know about you, Jay, but have you heard of people using like Chat GPT to help with MidJourney prompts at all, or is there any kind of
Yeah.
cross pollination like that?
Yeah. So we tried that in our class. And
Mm-hmm.
because I'd seen a few YouTubers say that they could do it, we did not get the same results as we did from working with a proven prompt structure.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that because ChatGPT only goes past what 2021,
Mm-hmm.
and MidJourney really took off with their versions 3 and 4. I mean 4 and 5 in 2022 and 23. I think that it was prompting for older versions, so we were
Mm.
not getting good results with the prompts, and so I think
I,
that there is going to come a time though when one AI is going to be able to generate instructions for another AI. I don't think we're that far off from it.
Yeah,
Ray?
and I think one of the yes, Ronnie, I think
Oh.
you're back, so that's great.
Yeah, I think we now have these things called agents that are meant for that, for chaining things. And they're actually strangely prompted to kind of think, how do I Google something like this and kind of revisit the prompt consistently, recursively until they get to it?
Mm.
With
You're talking about
ChatGPT
Auto
and
GPT, I
MidJourney,
think, right? Maybe.
uh, Auto GPT, Hugging Face agents are another thing that we're seeing on a programmatic level.
Hmm.
Nowadays, if you have ChatGPT Plus, you can enable that to kind of browse the internet and sort of see that the wheels turning, so to speak.
Hmm.
With prompts and ChatGPT, if you've had success in the past, give it some context and try this out. Like say to ChatGPT, this is a really good prompt. Okay, try to do this, but with uh, XY, subject. And a lot of times, giving it that initial priming kind of teaches it what to do.
Hmm. Yeah, one of the new prompts I believe, Jay, you probably know about this is I think there's a new prompt in Midjourney called Describe. I think that
Yes.
gives you some data, right?
So it does. It needs a little bit more work because when you put in the original, it kind of gives you artists that are not really connected to the
Mm.
artwork, like we click on the links and go out. And so it probably needs a little work, but the concept, in terms of the fact you upload a picture and then it gives you the prompt to then turn around and use. I have found that it will come in, and we actually did a challenge with my students on the Discord server. It does a really, really good job of giving you something related. But if you were to use the prompt without the image link,
Hmm.
little bit off. But
It's
if
getting
you're
there. Yeah.
using a reference image, it's pretty spot on.
Yeah, and I know that that's another good tip to, use like reference images to try to get it to be closer. And there's all kinds of AIs that are using that. Like I know, you can have the AIs mimic like the pose of the person. So much in there. I feel like we could probably be here forever talking about all this, but we are a little bit out of time. I'm gonna answer one more question from Travis Pearson, and this looks like it's more for Ronnie. How would engineers be able to showcase knowledge or ability to use these AI tools to prospective employees? So you are a developer, you want
Great
to have
question.
something on your portfolio. What would it be?
First of all, like everything, build something and make it open source, and the world will see it. Now, just like we have GitHub for
Hmm.
open source projects, we have Hugging Face, which has a ton of models, and people are pushing models and data sets. So, if you've created a model that does better at representing underrepresented people, just a thought, put it on there and somebody will see it and utilize it, and it can go viral. Hugging Face is
Hmm.
incredible. So that's one way of putting it together. This experience is extremely scarce these days. So being able to
Hmm.
showcase that you've trained a model, that makes you a cutting edge resource in this industry.
Hmm.
um, so I think get to know this, get to know, the Transformers library is now the second most downloaded machine learning library. It's been
Wow.
around for not so much time. Transformers have been around since 2017, folks. Like, before 2017, none of this even seemed possible for the next 50 years. So yeah, showcase your work.
Yeah, I think like from a being that I'm another developer, I'll give this another perspective. Learn to work with the APIs. If you want to showcase your ability to work with ChatGPT as a developer, do something with the APIs and build something that you will find the ChatGPT API is surprisingly simple. Here's what you were mentioning: Hugging Face transformers. You said it was like the second most sort of downloaded. So this is part of Hugging Face, but you can download this library and start using it. And there's like a lot of great documentation. From your perspective, Jay, and we'll kind of close with this as the last question. If you are, say, just a non-developer applying for a job today, what AI skills, do you want to highlight, and then perhaps like how do you get those?
Yeah, it's almost like going back to school when the math
Mm-hmm.
teacher would say, show your work, right?
Mm,
You can't just show the images. You've got to show the prompt that created the images, right?
mm-hmm.
Because it would be an opportunity for someone to copy that prompt and see if they get similar results. That's how you can tell how good it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so show your work, the results and the prompt. And I think that also put it someplace that's easy to get to, right? It can be a PDF on a Google Drive link. Don't make it super complex where people got to log in and,
Mm-hmm.
make it super, don't make it difficult for people to hire you by making
Mm.
things complex. I don't want anybody to look at it. I don't want anybody to steal it. Nobody wants your stuff, right? They want to give you a job. They want to give you an opportunity. So, and here's the thing: if you created what you say you did, you can create more. So don't be so into like making it so secure that no one
Mm.
can see it or access it so that they can give you an opportunity. Because the people that are hiring don't know as much as you do. They just simply need to see
That's
it.
true.
So make it easy.
Yeah, I think if you had that ability to explain prompting and describe a project that you've done, maybe starting a podcast or start a newsletter, and let people know this is how I'm using this tool. You can see that I know how to, generate images with MidJourney, inserted them into the newsletter. Find a project. That's what we tell developers. Find something to do, and then just kind of show people what you've done instead of necessarily talking about it. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. What a great conversation. I just want to mention a couple of things. So we have a number of places where you can learn more. You can go to the page on LinkedIn, and it's go.rabo.org/TFIT. There's also a newsletter and show notes. So if you wanted to learn more about any of the items that I mentioned in this episode, all the links will be there. I have a whole bunch of links to add there. And you can also get the highlights, watch the episode directly there. There's also a guide, the episode guide, which has all the previous episodes and all the future episodes. And you can watch that there. There's also a YouTube playlist. And also, if you want to listen to this while, taking your dog out for a walk, which is something I really need to do for my dog right now, you can listen and download the audio podcast. So, in addition to that, next week we have another exciting guest. I'm so happy to be able to have like all these amazing people. I was talking to my boss earlier and I told him it's like I'm talking to geniuses every week. So, I'm really thankful. Next week, we have Ado Kuchik. He is a developer advocate at DigitalOcean, which is a premier, hosting platform, cloud hosting platform. So we're going to get a little more nerdy and geeky and learn about how data, which is at the base of everything that happens with AI, how it works, how AI uses data, and how a lot of the models that are appearing right now are basically all about customizing your data to make sure that when you have basically your own personal GPT that knows about you and can do things based on your data as opposed to the data of everybody in the internet for all time. So thank you again, everyone, for appearing.
Thanks for having
I
us.
learned so much. I'm gonna have to. What's fantastic about doing these and Descript is that I get to rewatch the episode like a couple of times, and there's a lot that I'm managing while I'm doing these. So it's always great to relax and listen to them again. Thank you so much, Jay and Ronnie, for being here. You take care.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.